After traveling nonstop, both domestically and internationally, basically all throughout this year, I've started to realize that traveling on credit card points and miles really is not as free as we tend to think. And with my recent trip to the Bahamas, staying in the Grand Hyatt Bahamas, this could not have been more true. So in this video, I want to do a deep dive on this topic of free travel through the lens of this trip, and I'll break this video down into 3 parts. Part 1 is going to be all about the redemption itself. So this is where I'm going to explain exactly how I made this trip happen, what points I used to do it, how much cash those points saved me, and what my final cent per point value was for the trip. Part 2 is going to be all about the finances, where I'll be discussing the out-of-pocket expenses that this trip did cost me, and why it's so important to have a solid travel credit card in your wallet for trips just like this. And then in part 3, we're going to draw some conclusions from all of this data and my experience to see whether or not this whole free travel thing is really all it's cracked up to be. With that being said, let's dive into part 1, the redemption. So just for some context here, this vacation was one that my girlfriend's family invited me on, and everything was already planned before I went into the booking. So I just basically fit this entire redemption into their existing plans. And funny enough, this is kind of what always happens whenever I go to book a trip. I don't usually have the luxury of planning a trip months out in advance where I can, have a lot of flexibility and just kind of play everything by ear and find the best redemption possible. Instead, I usually just have to make my points and my redemption fit whatever trip does just randomly come up, not the other way around. So with that being said, let's go ahead and break down the flights and the hotel costs here. As for the flights, I knew that I had to book my flight out of IAH, which is Houston's International Airport, and really the only flights that you can take between IAH or Houston and the Bahamas is with United Airlines. For those that don't know, unless you're flying like business class with United or you're using airline alliances to book United flights, which I probably should have done in this case looking back on it, the only real way to book United flights would either be through a travel portal or by transferring your Chase points directly to United. Now, since United's points are usually only worth like 1.2 cents per point, unless you use those methods I mentioned at the beginning, I just defaulted to using my Chase Sapphire Reserve through the Chase travel portal to give me a guaranteed 1.5 cent per point redemption. That way I knew I was beating that average estimation of United points. If I had more time to make this booking and was flexible on dates and stuff like that, I would have tried to use the SkyTeam Alliance, specifically Air Canada, to book United Airlines flights. But again, a lot of times for me, I'm kind of in a pinch and need to book the flights quickly and don't have any flexibility. So that's why I defaulted to this method for this booking. Sorry for the interruption, but real quick, I want to mention that if you check all the links in my descriptions at the time of me making this video, I do have a place where you can sign up for transfer bonus notifications as well as elevated welcome offer notifications. And that could especially be helpful for this topic at hand when it comes to utilizing airline alliances and international travel partners to book domestic flights, since you might be able to have a transfer bonus with certain international partners that would make your domestic flights a lot cheaper. And if you do want to stay notified for all of those things, like I said, link down below. It's a completely free thing to do. I don't get anything special whenever you sign up, but let's get back into the video. Now, the screenshot that I'm showing here is only for one person, and I did book for 2 passengers, me and my girlfriend. So you can multiply all of these numbers in the payment summary by 2 to get the real values that I had to spend. So if I was to have booked these flights in cash at that time, it would have cost me $1,296. But instead, I used 86,400 Chase points at a 1.5 cent per point valuation. That way, I didn't have to pay for those flights out of pocket. Also, this may be a story for another video just because I don't want to make this one too long, but I actually did run into some pretty big issues with these flights when I booked through the Chase travel portal. And long story short, those issues were resolved like the day before the flight took off. So that was a little bit stressful and ended up not being too big of a deal. Now let's switch gears and talk about the hotel real quick. As I mentioned earlier, we stayed at the Grand Hyatt Bahamas in Nassau, Bahamas. And remember here that they actually had already selected this hotel. I did not convince them to stay at a Hyatt property, even though I do love the Hyatt resorts. I honestly just got really lucky on this because if not, it would have been really hard for me to use my points anywhere else. But since I have a ton of Chase points and y'all know that I use my Chase points with Hyatt very frequently, that's exactly how I booked this trip. I did not use the travel portal, of course, because transferring your points from Chase to Hyatt is going to usually give you a higher redemption rate than that 1.5 cents per point. And that is exactly what happened here, as you're about to see from these numbers. So as you can see from the screenshot here, I initially booked 4 nights on this vacation, which if I would have paid in cash would have costed me $2,565.88. But instead, what I opted to do was transfer over 100,000 Chase Ultimate Rewards points to my Hyatt account to make this booking happen, which of course is an effective 25,000 points per night. After I made this booking, they actually changed the trip and added 1 night to it. So I added a 5th night to this stay for another 25,000 points, which I did by just calling Hyatt directly. And assuming the same cent per point value that I got for the 100,000 points I redeemed in the first place, that means the cash price for those 5 nights would be $3,207.35. And in doing a cent per point calculation, we can take that $3,207.35, divide that by 125,000 points that were used for this booking, multiply by 100, and that comes out to a 2.57 cent per point valuation. So obviously that's really not bad at all in my books, and that is why I love Hyatt as a partner so much. Accumulating all of this information here, for the flights and the hotel, I spent a total of 211,400 Chase points, which, yeah, that is a lot for sure. But those points saved me $4,503.35. The average cent per point valuation for all of those points came out to 2.13. So overall, getting more than 2 cents per point for my Chase points is something I'll take all day. Now, if you're somebody like me who is on the team travel side of the credit card game, you'll likely get to a point where you have a lot of travel credit cards from a lot of different lenders, and you'll need to find a way to manage those effectively. And personally, I use the sponsor of today's video, Max Rewards, to do that for me. For those that don't know, Max Rewards is an all-in-one credit card management app that allows you to track things like your total point balances, card balances, bill due dates, and more from a multitude of lenders, all in one convenient interface. Travel credit cards can get really expensive quick, and one of the tools that Max Rewards has recently added to their paid tier, Max Rewards Gold, is called Card Value, and this is something that I found a lot of value in. No pun intended. What this tool shows you is exactly how much value you've gotten from your card in the card member year or calendar year. That way you can tell if you need to either downgrade or cancel the card, or keep it open and keep getting a ton of value from it. On top of that, Max Rewards Gold also automatically activates your quarterly rotating categories for you on your cards like your Chase Freedom Flex, and will automatically activate all of your credit card offers for you. Plus, they have a ton of other free features as well, like their welcome bonus tracker that I talk so highly about. So if you're somebody that even just wants to try out the free version of this app, please be sure to download it through the link in my description. And during the sign up process, you can enter the promo code Spencer to give you a 1-month discount off of your annual Max Rewards Gold subscription if you do ever decide to upgrade. Thank you to Max Rewards for sponsoring this video, as always, but let's get back into the content. Now let's get into part 2 here, the finances. For starters here, I just want to mention how important it is to have a very solid travel credit card with no foreign transaction fees and a respectable earning rate on your most used categories while you're traveling. Specifically for me, that would be dining and travel. So for this trip, I personally used my Chase Sapphire Reserve for literally every single purchase, and that was either via a room charge, which I had the card on file with, or directly with my card in person. So this card helped me in a ton of ways on this trip. Like, for one, it had no foreign transaction fees, but it also gave me my credit for global entry and TSA pre-check, which helped me get through customs super fast. I was literally the only person in the global entry line while people had to wait an hour plus to get through customs, so that felt pretty cool. But it also gives me lounge access, a $300 annual travel credit, and much more, hence why I just love it so much. Now, the Chase Sapphire Reserve might not be the best fit for you by any means, especially if you don't have a Chase lounge in your home airport like I have the luxury of having. But either way, having a reliable travel credit card has been such a huge game changer for me over this year of traveling, and I've actually made videos covering all of the premium travel credit cards and which one might be the best fit for you. So if you haven't applied for one of these yet and you're thinking about doing so, I would recommend watching that video after this one. But aside from everything I just listed, one of the biggest benefits was that I was the only person there actually in our group with a card that had no foreign transaction fees. So that means I routed everybody's expenses through my card and earned a ton of points for doing so. So to get into the numbers part of this section, summarizing my out-of-pocket expenses, or just all of the money that got charged to my card either via room charge or directly, I had a Hyatt bill of $992.50 that got charged to me at the very end of my stay, and that was for all of the restaurants and stuff that we charged straight to the room. As for charges on the card, I put $1,164.37 on it. Combine those two numbers, I spent $2,156.87 over the course of this trip for the group of 4 people, including myself, that were there. I did get reimbursed $1,307 over the course of this trip, and that was because, again, not all this was actually my spend that I put on my card, but my net cost for the entire trip was $849.87. So we're looking at roughly $100 to $200 per day, and that was mainly just for food. The food prices at the Grand Hyatt Bahamas were insane. So that's all good to know. We can see that right off the bat, this travel is not free. But if I look back at my statement for the month, I can see that literally everything coded as either travel or dining, aside from a couple of sunscreen purchases, which once again, the sunscreen was like $30 a bottle, which is insane. And in reality, I should have just charged those to my room, because then they would have coded as travel rather than just like a miscellaneous category. That was only $61 worth of purchases though, so losing out on a couple of points back on those is not a big deal. Outside of that though, the rest of the money that I spent on my card was coded as a 3X category, meaning that I earned a total of 6,350 points for that trip. At 1 cent per point, that's a cash value of $63.50. Through the travel portal with my Chase Sapphire Reserve, that's a 1.5 cent per point valuation, coming out to $95.25, and at a conservative 2 cent per point estimation with transfer partners, that would be $127 worth of value. We can now take that amount of money out of what I actually spent over the course of the trip, leaving me a net cost after my points value of $725 to $785. Let's just call it $750 to make it easy. Now, combining the financing section of this with the redemption section, if I wouldn't have used any points for this trip at all, this entire trip, including flights, hotels, food, everything, would have cost me $5,353.22. But thanks to the points that I redeemed and the points I earned for all my spend, I left this trip only having paid $750. So yes, this travel is not free, but I basically got 85% off of this trip, at least in cash, by utilizing my points, which I am very, very happy with. Now let's move into part 3, which are the conclusions. The first thing we have to mention here is that free travel is never truly free. I think we sometimes confuse ourselves into thinking that the trips that we book are completely free, when in reality, that's just not true. There's other stuff we have to spend money on, for one, like the excursions, the food, the added fees and stuff like that that come up. And as you saw here, I still had to run over $2,000 worth of expenses through my credit card for our group, which is not a small amount by any means. And the truth here is that whenever you book a really nice resort like the one that we did, this is the exact kind of game they want to play with you. They'll let you book your trip in points and they'll let you get there for free and stuff like that. But as soon as you get there, you're basically trapped. They'll make you spend as much money as they want you to spend on all of the food and everything within the resorts. And that's where it can really come to bite you. So say you're somebody that booked this trip completely in cash and you were like, okay, I can budget out the $5,000 for the trip, but then you get there and you get hit with another $2,000 worth of expenses that you didn't expect to pay. That's where this travel gets really dangerous, and why I feel very fortunate to be able to use credit card points to offset such a massive chunk of these expenses. As I mentioned earlier, the Grand Hyatt Bahamas in particular is a really amazing property, but their resort fees and just super expensive pricing on their food was honestly just like insane, and it started to add up extremely quickly. So that's one takeaway from this trip, but let's add a little bit to that first point and say that free travel is never truly free, but it sure is a heck of a lot cheaper. And I want to start this little section here by talking about the 211,000 chase points I had to use for this trip. I've seen arguments in the comment section before talking about how those points that I used actually do have like an opportunity cost of just over $2,000 in this specific case. And while that is true, I don't personally calculate this as any kind of actual hard cost, since I didn't have to spend anything extra to get these points into my account. And as somebody on team travel too, I don't know about you, but I would really never redeem my chase points for cash, especially when you see that even this trip in particular gave me more than double the cash value of those points and helped me actually make this trip happen with a lot less stress than if I would have had to pay cash for it. But still, you may be saying, well, 211,000 chase points is still a ton of points, so it must be nice for you to be able to redeem that many. And I want to assure you that that amount of points is actually not that hard to accumulate, even just within a few months. Like for example, you could go get 2 Chase Ink cards right now. The Chase Ink Preferred at the time of recording has a 120,000 point offer on it, and the Chase Ink Cash or Unlimited have 75,000 point offers on them. With the spend you have to do to hit those bonuses, you're already at the 211,000 points I used. So while yes, you do have to apply for multiple cards and go for welcome offers to get this amount of points, it's not that unheard of to do. But either way, this is something I say a lot on my channel, but in the future, I know for a fact that I will never remember how many chase points I used for this trip. All I'll remember are the memories that I made with the people that I was with there. And to me, those memories are priceless. So even though I did have to spend a bunch of chase points to make this happen, I would and will actually do this time and time again and be really excited to do so. And if I'm being honest with y'all, the fact that I booked this trip in points actually made it a lot more enjoyable, because if I would have had to front up that amount of cash before this trip, I probably would have been a bit of a cheapskate as it came to like all the meals that we had, and I would have tried to be a lot more frugal on the trip. But instead, since I saved $4,500 on the flights and the hotel itself, I splurged a bit on the nice dinners, always get like a bottle of wine and stuff like that, and really didn't think twice because I knew that I was already so much in the positive. That method of thinking obviously can be dangerous and you never want to overspend no matter what, but it is nice to have those points free up a little bit of cash flow that you can afford to spend anyways. And for me, I don't know, I think it just removes like a big psychological barrier that I have with money on these nice vacations. Another thing that I like to harp on quite a bit here is that to me, points are meant to be used. That may sound obvious, but I know that a lot of us still fall victim to saving our points for some really, really big redemption in the future that may never honestly come, or if it does, it's going to take quite a while to get here. And while yes, that trip would be extremely enjoyable, I know it would be, I'd much rather put my points to use in the meantime and then constantly apply for welcome offers in order to replenish my point stack, so that whenever that big trip does present itself, I can still do that one while enjoying all of my trips in the meantime. And this is obviously a big reason that I like Chase credit cards so much. They're one of the only lenders that allow you to basically get infinite welcome offers on their cards as long as you play by their rules. So if you're wondering why I have so many of their cards or why I talk so highly about them, it's because of trips like this. Everybody is going to play the credit card game differently at the end of the day. And while we may not all agree on how to use our points, I do think that we can all agree that putting your points to use to make memories with people that you love is a net positive. And yes, getting maximum value from your points is amazing, but just remember why you got into this game in the first place. Have a plan, stick to it, and go make your points work for you. And if you want to hear more about my travel strategy and philosophy for this year, go ahead and click into this video next. And finally, as always, Odin and I both want to say thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, and we'll catch you guys next time.